There has been a third explosion in the area of the World Trade Center. There was first one plane that hit one of the Twin Towers, a second plane, each about 1 hour ago, and now a third explosion. Ashley Banfield is in Manhattan. Ashley, did you see or hear anything just moments ago?
Oh my God, Chris, this is incredible. I'm looking right at it.
What are you seeing, Ashley?
Well, I saw the explosion for one.
Did you feel it?
Everybody, I can smell it. Everyone around screamed at the time that it happened. It's just unbelievable. I can't see that it's another building. It looks almost in the same position as the second bomb or the second explosion. But it's unbelievable.
What's the scene around you? What are people doing?
Most people, as I said earlier, are absolutely aghast.
Are they running?
No one's running. No, I'm not close enough at this point to be seeing that. I wouldn't be showered with debris from my position here. I'm too far north of it, but I have a bird's eye view of what's happening. And this is what the route that I'm on is the emergency route right now. So all of the emergency vehicles are streaming past us. But as I was looking up, I saw the entire explosion. It looked exactly like the first two. Unbelievable. And everyone who watched it around me screamed. It was just a chorus of "Oh my God" from everyone standing around. I'm walking, so what I'm hearing are a lot of people whose cars are parked, who got their radios tuned to the local news stations and trying to catch up on just exactly what's happening. But now I'm seeing people running. But I don't think it has any, no, I really don't think that they're running from the area. We're too far away to be in the direct line of any debris. But we certainly had the most perfect vantage point for that explosion. It was unbelievable. And the smoke now is so thick. It's just incredible.
And some people were...
Jamie, I need you to stop for a second. There has just been a huge explosion. We can see a billowing smoke rising. And I'll tell you that I can't see that second tower, but there was a cascade of sparks and fire, and now it looks almost like a mushroom cloud explosion, this huge billowing smoke in the second tower. This was the second of the two towers hit. And I cannot see behind that smoke, obviously, as you can either. The first tower in front has not changed, and we see this extraordinarily and frightening scene behind us of this second tower, now just encased in smoke. What is behind it, I cannot tell you. But just look at that. That is about as frightening a scene as you will ever see.
The two towers, a huge explosion now, raining debris on all of us.
We're not sure exactly what happened, but there was another explosion on the far side of one of the buildings from where we're standing. The reverberation and another explosion on the right-hand side. Another building has gone up on the right-hand side of the road. People are now running down the street. We're not sure if that was another explosion or if that was advanced debris.
It's just coming down, Pat. It is just coming down.
Watch the right
it's
side.
Exploding.
It's ripping apart.
It is billowing. Pat, the debris is flying. I'm going to run.
At this point, as you can tell, there's absolute pandemonium in this area because of what had just happened. Exactly what, I can't confirm, but on the far side of the building, there seemed to be another explosion, and also on the right-hand side, there was also another explosion. We're not sure if that was extra reverberation from what happened at the World Trade Center, or if that was an added explosion. At this point, there's a lot of smoke, massive plumes of smoke falling from the building across the street. People that were running down the street or walking are now running away. We don't have any information as far as what the most recent reverberations were, but from 2 blocks away, you could feel what happened.
John, the scene is horrific. One of the two towers literally collapsed. I was making my way to the foot of the World Trade Center. Suddenly, while talking to an officer who was questioning me about my press credentials, we heard a very loud blast, an explosion. We looked up, and the building literally began to collapse before us. And I am now standing in a black cloud of smoke. I'm on a payphone on the street right now, and I literally cannot see more than a quarter block away. That's how thick the smoke is. I'm on Murray Street in West Broadway, for those who know Lower Manhattan. Not clear now is why this explosion took place. Was it because of the planes that two planes dual attacks this morning, or was there some other attack which there has been talk of here on the street?
Again, there has been a second explosion here in Manhattan at the Trade Center. We are getting reports that a part of the tower, the second tower, the one a bit further to the south of us, has collapsed. We are checking on that. What we can tell you is that just in the last several minutes here, 2 or 3 minutes, a second or third, I guess technically, extraordinary event has happened here in Lower Manhattan. You can see this extraordinary plume of smoke that is, or was at least, the second tower of the World Trade Center.
I arrived on the scene about an hour and a half ago, and believe it or not, there was another major explosion. The building itself, literally the top of it, came down, sending smoke and debris everywhere. I had to do all I could to run to get away from all the debris. Me and a number of other people here are trapped in the subway here in a shoe store, actually trying to get away from most of the debris. It's just an incredible sight.
Do you know if it was an explosion or if it was a building collapse?
To me, it sounded like an explosion. Then the building, the rolling sound sounded like the building collapsed.
Were there other people? There must have been a lot of people on the ground nearby when it happened.
Where that happened, there was mostly law enforcement. I don't think there were many civilians there. I don't know.
Don't move, Pat. How many people would you say were on the ground when the building exploded or collapsed? When the building did collapse or whatever it was that happened, it was a huge explosion, a huge rumbling cloud of smoke and fire came across Church Street and then started billowing this way. The FBI is here, as you can see. They had roped this area off. They were taking photographs and securing this area just prior to that huge explosion that we all heard and felt.
I can only hope that people got out of the area on the sidewalks below the South Tower before it came tumbling down. But it literally exploded and came down as though it had been hit. Plumes of smoke moving out into the harbor. Give you some idea where I am. I'm approximately, 20, 30 blocks from where this latest explosion just happened. The west.
And we were standing here when there was some sort of collapse or explosion, and everyone started running in this direction.
Andrew, when you saw this happen, what did it look like to you at close range? Because to us, it seemed almost like dominoes, going floor by floor by floor.
It was a little difficult at first to figure out what was happening. We heard an explosion. We heard either an explosion or the sound of something making impact. And we were in the middle. I was with news assistant Jason Post, and we were walking down West Street. And when we heard the sound, we whipped around and saw just a buckling of the tower. And it just looked like it collapsed within itself. You could just see the top of the tower collapse. We can't tell what happened to the bottom half of the tower from here.
I would like you to describe one more time what it felt like when that tower collapsed. What did it feel like to you on the ground there?
We were standing probably about 3 blocks away, advancing toward the scene to try and gather some photos and some videotape, and it felt like the entire ground shook. It felt like what it feels like to be in a earthquake. The ground was shaking, followed by plumes and plumes of overwhelming smoke and flying debris, ash and pieces of the building. As the ground was shaking.
Was there sound with this, Nina?
There's a tremendous booming sound, and then it just felt like a rumbling, but it didn't sound like an explosion. It sounded like a loud rumbling, and then the next thing we saw were the streets. The way the streets looked was just overcome by smoke, just plumes and plumes of smoke, like a bomb had gone off, coming up the street as people were racing to get in front of these clouds of smoke and not doing too good of a job. When the explosion happened, was shooting pieces of the plane. There are pieces of the plane on Church Street.
There's another explosion as we speak.
Seconds before the explosion happened, there was another renewed kind of interest in really getting people away. Because, of course, out of curiosity, everyone's trying to get close. Everyone's trying to get pictures of the World Trade Center on fire. They started screaming, "Get back, get back." There's another explosion happening. I guess they were being warned on their radios that the top was going to come down since it was burning for the better part of half an hour. As they screamed to get people back, they started screaming, "Leave Manhattan if possible. Everybody leave Manhattan if possible."
As you can imagine, it is a pretty frenzied scene out here. Just a few moments ago, I'd say about 20 minutes ago, we're not sure exactly what it was. We have not confirmed it, but something either exploded or fell off the side of the one building that was attacked and caused a massive plume of smoke.
And the
about a block away, and there were several people that were hanging out the windows right below where the plane crashed, when suddenly you saw the top of the building start to shake, and people began leaping from the windows in the north side of the building. You saw 2 people at first plummet, and then a third one, and then the entire top of the building just blew up, and splinters of debris are falling on the street.
John, just seconds ago there was a huge explosion, and it appears right now the second World Trade Tower has just collapsed.
I was right next to the South Tower. I was about 2 blocks away. It was just a small explosion, and then rocks and debris and everything started pouring down.
But we were about 2 blocks away when the second explosion hit, and all we heard was just this small explosion. Then you saw a roar of an explosion, and all kinds of smoke coming, billowing out, debris falling down, people running, the firefighters and police screaming at everyone to run as the debris was coming down and hitting people.
Good morning again, Pat. I am actually just across from City Hall. I don't have to tell you, with that second explosion, the dust did not seem as bad, but it's unbelievable because you hear these explosions. In fact, I just heard another one. I don't know if it was like an after effect or whatnot, just while you were on the phone talking about the school closings. And it wasn't as big, obviously, as the other ones, but it still sent a tremor all the way over here, and I'm obviously on the other side of the World Trade Center, on the other side of the city. And it's just unbelievable. And then you see, I'm hearing another explosion, just so you know. I'm hearing another rumble. It's not as bad as the other ones were, but I don't know if you have pictures that you can see.
We have a picture, and we don't see anything beyond the enormous billows of smoke that have been there, but no additional bursts from our vantage point.
Okay, I didn't mean to interrupt, Sharon.
No.
What you can feel when these tremors come is that it literally comes up under your feet. That's what it feels like. That's the best way I know to describe it.
Well, it looks like a large chunk of that debris has hit a building very close by, about 2 blocks away next to an elementary school, causing another explosion. So as people are coming up the street running from the scene of this new explosion, you can see them slipping on the ash and literally having to drag each other up the street.
You have to understand that when this first happened, they certainly didn't imagine that there would be second or tertiary explosions, so they parked some of their vehicles in those areas, and many of those vehicles, people in those vehicles, have lost their lives.
Well, we just heard another explosion go off a couple of minutes ago, Chris, and saw a bunch more people sort of running this way. A woman on her bike was screaming as it went off, and there was a New York City officer, he's plain clothes, walking by with a radio. I tried to stop him to ask what happened. And all he said was car bomb. And then I couldn't press him for any more information. He said, I have no time for this. And we haven't seen anything since, but the cloud of smoke is still extremely thick around, right around the direct vicinity of the World Trade Center. I am now about, I'd say, what do you say, we're about 5 or 10 blocks north of it now? About 5 or 10 blocks north of it, and just unbelievably, the sun has come out, this blue sky above us. We started with, I mean, sheer blackness. When that cloud of debris and of smoke came at us when the explosion happened, we couldn't see anything. We couldn't breathe. We tried to make our way a few blocks up, and we made contact with some other NBC crew here. It's terrifying here, Chris. When that last bomb went, or when that last collapse happened, and the cloud came out, it was like something out of Hollywood. It's really eerie seeing the people who got caught in that blast because everyone looks like a ghost.
About an hour ago, I was on the corner of Broadway and Park Place. That's about 1,000 yards from the World Trade Center when the first tower collapsed. It was a massive explosion. At the time, the police were trying desperately to evacuate people from the area. When that explosion occurred, it was like the scene out of a horror film.
After the second tower went down, I was trying to make my way to a CBS crew or to try to help CBS crews if I could. And then, I don't know what it was, John, but another explosion, a rolling blast of fire, a rolling column of fire towards us. If my respect for fire and police already knew no bounds, given the danger, it now exceeds what I thought it could, because a firefighter threw me into the wall of a building, covered me with his body as the flames approached us. And another police officer in New York named Brendan Duke, wherever he is, got me through smoke that neither one of us could see more than about a foot ahead of us. There are still people in there, excuse me, I've breathed a fair amount of soot. The personnel, the police and the fire working in there are doing so against really dangerous odds, and they still don't know if there's something else left to explode, John.
Where were you at the time?
I was Not being a New Yorker, you'll have to help me here. I came around Stuyvesant High School, and that street is North End, and I came up and asked if anyone had seen a CBS crew. And I was directed by a firefighter who said, walk down the middle of the road because you don't know what's going to come down, at which point we heard a rumble like I've never heard before, and a firefighter ran towards me. We ran as fast as we could. I lost my shoes. I fell down. He picked me up and slammed me into a wall and covered me with him until we could make it more to safety.
Was this from the first rolling blast or the second?
John, I looked at my watch. It was about 10:44 is what my watch said. So it was after the second, I think the second tower explosion.
All right, Carol.
The scene was like a ghost town in the financial district, very eerie. You saw people being wheeled on gurneys away from the site of the explosion. Now, at the time, I was back on the corner again of Broadway and Park Place. That time, the police started running toward us, telling everybody to move who was left on the street. I looked up, and that's when I heard the, pardon me, that's when I heard the explosion. That's when the second tower came down again.
At that time, maybe 45 minutes into the taping that we were doing, which was maybe a half hour after, there was it was an explosion. It was way up where the fire was, and the whole building at that point bellied out in flames, and everybody ran.
Aaron, just 2 or 3 minutes ago, there was yet another collapse or explosion. But at 11:15, there was another collapse or explosion following the 10:30 collapse of the second tower. And a firefighter who rushed by us estimated that 50 stories went down. The street filled with smoke. It was like a forest fire roaring down a canyon.
Mayor Giuliani appeared about 45 minutes ago on Chambers Street near Church Street. We began walking up Church Street when the second building proceeded to collapse, and a huge flume of smoke went up into the air, and the mayor and his party started running up 6th Avenue. A plainclothes detective threw his arm around Mayor Giuliani as we took off, not knowing what the repercussions of that second explosion would be. And for about 10 minutes, they tried to break into this fire station as the mayor stood by and the police commissioner stood by, waiting to set up an operations center. That's kind of wanted to paint a picture of kind of the seat-of-the-pants operation that they've been forced to construct here because of the explosion downtown.
Dan, we're 3 blocks from the scene, and we saw it all after the first 2 hits. We saw the explosion and also the collapse of the tower.
Well, we've been told, as a matter of fact, moments ago to try and get out of this area because they're moving everyone out. And their fear is, of course, that there are gas leaks, natural gas in this area that either fed into or out of the buildings that have exploded. And now those lines are open and may rupture.
But there were many tears. There was an awful lot of anguish, and then with subsequent explosions, and when a portion of World Trade 1 hit the ground, there was an enormous burst, a cloud of smoke and debris that started moving north.
I was getting ready to talk with Haynes during Squawk Box, and the fire was raging in both buildings. I looked up at the south building, the second World Trade Center to be hit, and explosions were coming down the building. It looked as if charges had been set on each floor and they were in succession going off. Now, this was probably not what was happening. It just looked that way to me. The building just blew out floor by floor, and it probably had something to do with the structural damage that was done by the plane hitting it. When I saw the floor-by-floor explosions happening, I dove out of the office where I was because the windows looked directly over the World Trade Center. We are in the World Financial Center, directly across West Street from the 2 trade centers. By the time I came up from under a desk where I sought shelter, the entire floor, the entire room where I was completely dense with cement and smoke. You could not see. We were so close to the building that you could feel it hitting your shoulder as it rained down. But we were on the safe side of the building, much safer than where the firefighters were on the other side of the building, exposed directly to the explosion.
Just moments ago, I spoke to the chief of safety for the New York City Fire Department, who was obviously one of the first people here on the scene after those two planes were crashed into the side, we assume, of the World Trade Center towers, which used to be behind me over there. Chief Albert Turry told me that he was here just literally 10 or 15 minutes after the events that took place this morning. That is the first crash. The chief of safety, as I said, chief safety of the Fire Department of New York City, told me that shortly after 9 o'clock, he had roughly 10 alarms, roughly 200 men in the building trying to effect rescues of some of those civilians who were in there, and that basically he received word of the possibility of a secondary device, that is another bomb going off. He tried to get his men out as quickly as he could, but he said that there was another explosion which took place. And then an hour after the first hit here, with the first crash that took place, he said, there was another explosion that took place in one of the towers here. So obviously, according to his theory, he thinks that there were actually devices that were planted in the building. One of the secondary devices he thinks that took place after the initial impact was, he thinks, may have been on the plane that crashed into one of the towers. The second device he thinks, he speculates, was probably planted in the building. So that's what we have been told by Albert Turry, who is the chief of safety for the New York City Fire Department. He told me that just moments ago. But the bottom line is that according to the chief of safety of the New York City Fire Department, he says that he probably lost a great many men in those secondary explosions, and he said that there were literally hundreds, if not thousands, of people in those two towers when the explosions took place.
Well, I'm in that area, if you're familiar with this area of where West Broadway and Hudson come together, right at Chambers. That would put us about a block and a half away from the site of where the explosion was. That area has just been evacuated because police have found what they describe as a suspicious device, and they fear that it might be something that could lead to another explosion. Obviously, there's a real sense of caution here on the part of police. I spoke with some police officials moments ago, Chris, and they told me that they have reason to believe that one of the explosions at the World Trade Center, aside from the ones that may have been caused by the impact of the plane with the building, may have been caused by a van that was parked in the building that may have had some type of explosive device in it. So their fear is that there may have been explosive device planted either in the building or in the adjacent area, and that's why they're being so cautious in this vicinity right now. This is why it's so difficult for them in this area where we are. Imagine they came here originally to deal with the crisis. They set up some command centers, and they had many of their chiefs and many of their supervisors in the area of the building. The second and third explosions literally have wreaked havoc on those field forces and those command centers, so they've had to back up, and now they're trying to see how they can approach it again.
You know, as you walk through the ash, you can see debris from inside the World Trade Center itself, a very, very eerie scene, pieces of paper from people's desks, office supplies, many, many blocks from the site of the actual explosion, where they now are fearing that there may be yet another explosion because of this potential gas leak.
Well, Peter, I'm going to give you kind of a pool report from several of our correspondents down here of basically what happened down here in downtown New York between 9:45 and 10:45 when the two explosions and the collapse of the World Trade Center happened. At the time, I was actually in the subway heading towards the World Trade Center right around Franklin Street, and after the first explosion, the subway station started to fill with smoke. The subway cars started to fill with smoke, and the subways actually stopped. They then diverted us around the World Trade Center to Park Place, which is one stop beyond the World Trade Center. We got to that train station at around 10:35, Peter, and it was a scene unlike I've ever seen before in my entire life. As we tried to get out of the subway station and walk up into the street, it was pitch black, midnight black, snowing soot all down through downtown Manhattan. This was about 2 blocks from the World Trade Center. You couldn't see a foot in front of your face at that time.
Well, I was heading down after we had learned of it about 9 o'clock or 8:55 this morning. I had called in to see if we should go down and aid the coverage, and I was on my way down, and we got fairly close to the building, and I ran into a cameraman from MSNBC, and we were trying to get across town past the World Trade Center to the West Side Highway, which is on the lower southwestern corner of Manhattan, to hook up with our colleagues from CNBC. And as we were going across one of the restricted zones, the building started to explode, I guess is the only way I could describe it. It was hard to tell if it was an actual explosion, but the building began to come down. We heard that, I wouldn't call it an explosion. We did notice that the building began to blow at the top, and that material began to come down. And as we turned to run, material just began to fall. And like that scene in Independence Day where wind was just whipping down the street in the wake of an explosion, that's exactly what we experienced. And it went down the street, curved around corners, and blew with a fair degree of intensity, again, Tyler, until the sky was completely black.
And I was walking on Broadway at Fullerton, and suddenly we heard an explosion. It was the first tower coming down. And down Broadway, you could just see this wall of debris come flying at us. It looked like a war zone. Debris, dust, ankle deep, cars on fire, cars turned askew in the explosion. Then at about 10:30, it looked like everything was all clear. I started to walk out. I walked down Broadway towards Canal, and we heard the second explosion. At that point, a fireman came into the building and said we all had to stay in one place. He then told us all to get out of the building because they felt if there was a third explosion that this building would be in danger.
As we were moving towards the building, we saw the top begin to blow out in a plume of smoke, and we heard the noise associated with an implosion.
What did you see in the epicenter when you came out of that explosion? At the very start of the day when this happened, we were right in the epicenter where the explosion was. I'm right now covered in the debris and the dust from the explosion itself. I was hit with a cloud of debris and smoke. That is 7 World Trade Center. Apparently on the south side, that's the side that's not facing us, it's about halfway up. It's still burning pretty badly because it was rocked with a lot of the explosion from the force of the twin World Trade Centers when they came down. A large concern is what's going to happen with that brown building now, which is why we keep getting moved further and further north. You can see people down on the street moving towards us, even media who originally were allowed to have more free reign to report this story. We're being pushed out as well because there was some concern that there might be additional explosions, possibly other bombs.
And the real panic, I think, in my mind occurred, Maria, I was out front as you were when the second explosion occurred because so many people had been attracted to what was going on. The explosion threw debris on top of a lot of people. That was when the real panic began.
Do you know anything about the cause of the explosions that brought the 2 buildings down yet? Was it caused by the planes or by something else? Their second explosion. Could you tell us, do you expect any further attacks on New York? Is there anything to indicate that there could be more bombs, more planes out there? I know originally there was a report that 8 planes had been hijacked, 4 have only been accounted for. What about the remaining 4? And is there any possibility that there could be bombs on the ground planted by some?
So the only National Guard we'll see will be in Lower Manhattan in the bomb site area. They won't be patrolling the rest of Manhattan.
How would you describe your efforts to organize the rescue effort now, given that we saw a sequence of events this morning, a sequence of crashes, then explosions, and then the collapses?
Very difficult to breathe here, but look around. This must have been ground zero where this thing blew up. Car after car after car, buses completely obliterated and burned straight down to the steel.
Apparently what appears to happen was that at the same time 2 planes hit the building, that the FBI most likely thinks that there was a car or truck packed with explosives underneath the buildings, which also exploded at the same time and brought both of them down.
Now that's the first time we're hearing that. So 2 planes and explosives that were in the building, is that correct?
That is the working theory at this point. That is still unconfirmed, but that is what the FBI is going on at this point.
We've been told that all victims now who are taken out of the blast site are going to be taken here first. Part of the problem initially was that when the first rescue workers went in, and we've talked to some of them who have some of the second wave of rescue workers, the first wave of rescue workers who went in were trapped, many of them killed by the second blast. There have been hundreds of people at area hospitals, as you note, but they don't believe that anywhere near the full weight of this has yet been uncovered, that there are hundreds and thousands of people who have been injured in this blast, and that's the people that they expect to bring here.
10 o'clock this morning, photographer Glenn Mayrose and I, along with FBI agents, police officers, fire officials, we all thought for sure a bomb was set to explode underneath our feet outside 7 World Trade Center. We took off running for our lives north on Church Street. We had no idea idea the top of one of the twin towers had just exploded. As others looked back in shock and horror, we started another interview with a Port Authority engineer who worked at World Trade Center and spoke to us about the strength and integrity of the skyscrapers. Then, suddenly, the second tower erupted right before our eyes.
We heard another explosion, and I'm assuming that's the one that came from the lower level, since there were two. And I said,
right, because it was like 18 minutes apart.
Well, this is the first explosion, and there was a second explosion in the same building. There were two explosions.
Okay.
The ladies that are with me were in the World Trade Center in the first building and escaped through the lobby, where they report they believe there was a bomb in the lobby.
And even the turnstile was burnt and was sticking up, and they just told us to run.
And as we were coming out, we passed the lobby. There was no lobby. So I believe the bomb hit the lobby first, and a couple of seconds in the first plane hit.
You could see behind me, a moment ago, you could see all the way through, but from that last explosion that Jeff Rawson was telling us about, it is now again dark. It was strangely and eerily calm here in the financial district because everything's been evacuated. The only thing left in the street are people's shoes as they ran out of their shoes to escape the fire bombs and the explosions.
People were rushing to the windows. They were taking clothes. One thing looked like a blanket that they were waving. And then suddenly there was an explosion, and you saw folks start to jump out the front window of the building and plunge. I saw at least 6 people do this. Folks were pushing each other. Some people were screaming for help and then just falling out.